planning on taking the C1 advanced exam and you're not feeling very confident about your advanced grammar, then this video is for you. Because the grammar that takes students from a B2 style performance to a strong C1 mark, and sometimes even into a C2 level range, is not just hard grammar. It's grammar that gives your English more range, more precision, and more control. And that is exactly what Cambridge examiners are listening for in the C1 advanced exam. So in this video, I'm showing you 10 advanced grammar structures that are especially useful for C1 advanced speaking, writing, and use of English. We'll start with easier wins that you can use straight away and build up to some of the most impressive structures in the whole exam, especially towards the end of the video. And for each structure, I'll show you what it is, why it works, and one exam-ready sentence that you can use in C1 speaking or writing. And honestly, if you start using even just 3 of these well, your English will sound more fluent, more deliberate, and much more advanced. So let's start with one of the easiest upgrades that you can make, which is ellipsis. All right, the first one is ellipsis, and I love this one because it's one of the quickest ways to sound more natural and more advanced without learning any new vocabulary. Ellipsis is basically when you leave out words because the meaning is already obvious. It's not lazy English, it's efficient English. And proficient speakers do it constantly because if you say every single word, your English can sound correct, but slightly heavy, like you're reading from a script or translating. So let's make it real. Imagine a cafe. Without ellipsis, you could say, "Do you want some coffee?" And someone could reply, "Yes, I do want some coffee." It's not wrong, but it sounds repetitive. It repeats what everyone already knows. But with ellipsis, someone might ask, "Want some coffee?" "Yeah, I do." Same meaning, but now it sounds like a real conversation. Here's another one. Without ellipsis, "Are you coming with us?" "Yes, I am. Coming with you." Or with ellipsis, "Coming?" "Yeah." You don't need to say every single word because it's obvious from the context. And look at this example of a goodbye. You could say, "I will see you tomorrow," or simply, "See you tomorrow." So why is ellipsis better? Well, because it makes you sound confident and relaxed, like you don't need to over-explain. In speaking exams, that's powerful because it creates the feeling of fluency because your sentences sound lighter and more natural. So here's a C1 exam-ready example that you could use, for example, in speaking part 1. Imagine that the examiner says, "Do you enjoy reading?" You could say, "Yeah, I do. Especially before bed, helps me switch off." That "helps me switch off" is ellipsis. It's still clear, but it's much more natural. So how can you practice this? Well, maybe you could take 5 part 1 answers that you've already written and make each one just 10% shorter by cutting out repeated words. Just keep it clear. That's the sweet spot. So pause with me for a second because we're going to practice ellipsis together properly so it actually sticks. Because ellipsis is not about being lazy, it's about sounding like you're more confident in English. Because strong speakers don't say every word when the meaning is obvious. So I'm going to give you 2 sentences. The first one is easy, the second one is C1 or C2 level. And I want you to say the improved version out loud with me. So the first sentence is, "I will see you later." Are you ready? Say it out loud in 3, 2, 1. See you later. Good job. It's the same meaning, it's shorter, more natural, and it sounds like real spoken English, not like a boring school dialogue. Now, let's level up. Because this one is the kind of sentence you might say in speaking part 4 when you're giving an opinion. So rewrite this one to sound more natural using ellipsis. "I think that we should take action now because the situation is getting worse." Right. Make it shorter, but keep the meaning and say your version out loud. A strong answer could be, "I think we should act now. The situation's getting worse." Or even more natural and punchy, "We should act now. It's only getting worse." And that's such a good upgrade. Why? because the first version is correct, but it's a bit heavy. You've got extra words that don't add much meaning, like I think that and because. The ellipsis version sounds confident. It sounds like you're not hiding behind long phrases, and that's exactly the vibe you want to go for in C1 speaking. And if you can do that in real time, you're already sounding more advanced. So, ellipsis helps you sound lighter and more natural in conversation. But sounding advanced is not just about making sentences shorter, it's also about making your ideas easier to follow. So now let's move from sounding natural to sounding organized with discourse markers. All right, next up is discourse markers, which are also known as linking words, linking phrases, or sentence connectors. So think of these as the little signposts that guide your listener through your ideas. And this is so important at C1 because one of the big differences between B2 and C1 is not just grammar accuracy, it's how organized and logical you sound. Sometimes students have strong ideas, but the examiner feels like the answer is jumping around, and discourse markers fix that. Because a discourse marker tells your listener what's coming next, a contrast, a result, a second viewpoint, a summary. So your answer feels like it has a clear map. Here are a few that are absolute C1 gold. On the one hand, on the other hand, nevertheless, nonetheless, that said, as a result, in other words, in the long run. Now, let's do some before and after so you can feel the upgrade. Here's a sentence with no markers. Remote work is good. It can be isolating. People save time. They miss colleagues. It's not terrible, but it's choppy and list-like. And now with discourse markers. On the one hand, remote work is convenient because people save time. That said, it can be isolating since you don't get the same social contact. As a result, some people feel less motivated. Now it sounds structured and confident. Now here's a C1 exam ready example for speaking part 4 if the topic is social media, for example. On the one hand, social media keeps people connected. Nevertheless, it can also be addictive, which affects productivity. Or in an essay, nevertheless, the long-term impact of screen time on concentration cannot be ignored. Now, a common mistake I see is when people use too many. Because if every sentence starts with a marker, then it sounds unnatural. So 1 or 2 well-chosen markers per answer is enough. So discourse markers help you connect ideas across sentences. Now, let's zoom in and look at how to connect ideas inside a sentence, because that's where advanced relative clauses becomes really useful. Okay, now advanced relative clauses. This is one of those structures that makes you sound more fluent without trying too hard, because it helps you pack information into one sentence in a natural way. Relative clauses let you add extra detail using words like who, which, that, whose, or reduced forms like anyone wanting to. And the key benefit is that you stop speaking in lots of short, separate sentences that feel basic. Instead, you sound like you can connect ideas. So look at this. I have a friend. She lives abroad. She never misses class. That sounds like A2 or B1 sentence rhythm. Again, not wrong, just basic. Or, I have a friend who lives abroad and she never misses class. Now it's smooth. Look at this one. The course was incredible. You recommended it. Or, the course you recommended was incredible. Notice how I removed that? This is really common in spoken English because it sounds more natural. Now, the C1 trick that I love, anyone wanting to. This is a reduced relative clause and it's amazing because it sounds advanced, but it's really easy. Instead of saying anyone who wants to, we can reduce it and say anyone wanting to pass C1 should practice speaking regularly. It's more concise. Instead of saying, I've got a friend, she's really into fitness, you can say, I've got a friend who's really into fitness. So she's always trying new routines. Or maybe in your essay, students who revise consistently tend to perform better under pressure. Now, pause this video and write 4 sentences about your life and then add one who or which clause to each. Now, here are some sentence starters for you: the person who, the place where, the food that, anyone planning to. Relative clauses help you add detail smoothly and avoid basic patterns. But when you move into more formal writing, especially essays, reports, and proposals, you need a different kind of control. And that's where passive reporting verbs come in. Now, we're getting into that kind of grammar that instantly upgrades your writing, because passive reporting verbs are perfect for essays, but especially reports and proposals. Basically, anytime you want to sound formal and neutral, instead of saying people say or experts think all the time, use this structure. It is said that, it is believed that, it is expected that, it's widely accepted that, it's often argued that. So why do high-level writers use this? Well, because it sounds objective, like you're presenting an idea, like a general belief, not a personal opinion. And that's exactly what Cambridge likes in academic style writing. So let's do a quick before and after. Active voice. People say the exam is changing, but in the passive, it is said that the exam is changing. In the active, experts believe social media affects teenagers. Or the passive voice, it is widely believed that social media affects teenagers. Do you see how the second version sounds calmer and more academic? Because it also helps you avoid repeating people think or I think over and over again. So in a report or a proposal where the objective is to be as impersonal as possible and avoid the first person, you might write, it is often argued that flexible working hours increase productivity. Now, you should avoid using it too much or your writing sounds repetitive. And don't use it for personal stories because it's not for that. So how can you practice this? Well, you could choose an essay topic like education, technology, or the environment, and maybe write one intro sentence using it is widely believed that, and then write your own opinion after it, because that's a strong academic introduction move. So passive reporting verbs help you sound objective and academic, and if you want to take that formal style even further, then the next structure is one of the easiest ways to make your writing sound properly C1, and that's nominalisation. Nominalisation is a classic C1 writing upgrade because it means turning verbs or adjectives into nouns. Your writing sounds more formal and academic, and it also helps you summarize actions in a clean way, which is perfect for Cambridge essays and reports. So here's the simple idea. Instead of writing they decided, which is a verb, you write their decision. Instead of they refused, you write their refusal. And this makes the sentence sound less like a story and more like an analysis. They decided to cancel the event, or their decision to cancel the event upset many students. Can you feel how the second one sounds more formal? It has that report style voice. Here's another one. They refused to help, or their refusal to help caused delays. And one more. She arrived late, so the meeting started late, or her late arrival led to a delayed start. This structure is incredibly useful for C1 writing because it helps you write about causes and effects clearly. In a report, you could write, the introduction of flexible working hours led to increased productivity. Or in an essay, the rapid growth of online learning has changed students' expectations. Make sure you avoid these mistakes though, because overdoing it and making everything sound too heavy using nominalisation in informal writing tasks where it doesn't fit, like an informal email. And here is how to practice this. Take 5 common verbs like decide, refuse, arrive, improve, fail, and turn them into nouns. Decision, refusal, arrival, improvement, failure. and then write one sentence for each one in a formal tone. All right, guys, do this one with me. This is a proper C1 writing upgrade because nominalization is one of the easiest ways to make your writing sound more formal and more exam ready. I'll give you a basic idea first, and then we'll do a harder one after. So upgrade this sentence using nominalization. They wanted to help, but it would have been inconvenient. So pause this video for a second, convert the verb into a noun and go. A strong answer could be their desire to help would have been an inconvenience. Good job. All right, now let's go harder because this is exactly the kind of sentence students write in essays and it's usually too simple. So upgrade this next sentence using nominalization. The government decided to reduce public transport prices. Take a second. What's the noun form of decided? And how can we make this sound like an essay sentence? A strong C1 answer could be the government's decision to reduce public transport prices improved accessibility for low-income residents. Or even more academic, the decision to reduce public transport prices led to improved accessibility for low-income residents. Do you see what happened? Now it sounds analytical, not like a simple story. And that's the difference between good English and C1 writing. Nominalization is brilliant for making your writing sound analytical and formal. And staying in that formal register, let's move to another structure that instantly sounds advanced when used well in proposals, reports, and formal recommendations, and that is the subjunctive. Okay, the subjunctive. This one looks strange at first, but once you understand it, it becomes an easy C1 skill in formal writing. Because the subjunctive is used for recommendations, demands, and formal importance. You'll often see it after the phrases, it is essential that, it is vital that, I suggest that, I recommend that. And the key thing is that this verb stays in the base form. So it's he be, she arrive, they attend, with no s, no is. So look at these examples. I suggest that he be more careful. It's essential that she arrive on time. And a common mistake that people make is, I recommend that he is more careful. And that is sometimes heard in informal speaking, but after verbs of recommendation or suggestion or command, English uses the subjunctive mood. So it should be, I recommend that he be more careful. In a proposal, you might write, it's essential that students be given clear guidance before the exam. Now, that sentence is fantastic for proposals and reports because it sounds formal, authoritative, and well-controlled. Or if you're writing a formal email or letter, I suggest that the meeting be rescheduled to a later date. I suggest that this issue be dealt with immediately. And that's a very formal way of saying deal with the problem now. So avoid using it in casual speaking because it can sound too formal there. And how can you practice this? Well, maybe you could try writing 3 formal recommendation sentences using it is vital that, I recommend that, I suggest that. So pause the video and write your 3 sentences. And if you're a super motivated English learner, pop them in the comments and I'll correct them. Keep them simple, 1 sentence each, because that's enough to start. So far, we've looked at structures that make your English sound more formal and controlled, but now let's shift into something slightly different, emphasis. Because at C1, it's not just about being correct, it's about choosing exactly what you want to highlight. And that brings us to cleft sentences. Now we're into the emphasis tools. Because cleft sentences let you highlight the most important part of your sentence, like it's saying, this is the key point, pay attention to this. There are different types of cleft sentences. We've got it cleft sentences, for example, it plus be plus emphasize information. For example, it was the beef that gave me a tummy ache instead of the beef gave me a tummy ache. We've got what, cleft sentences, what plus subject plus verb plus be. For example, what I admired most is her discipline instead of I admire her discipline the most. We've got all, cleft sentences, all subject verb be. For example, all I want is for my dog to calm down. And there are other kinds too, but these are the most common ones. So instead of saying Oxford inspired my love of books, you can say it was Oxford that inspired my love of books. Instead of my students motivate me, it's my students who motivate me. This is powerful because it changes the feeling of the sentence. It sounds more deliberate and more advanced. You're controlling emphasis, and examiners love that because it shows range of grammar. Now, a C1 exam-ready example for speaking part 4, for example, is what affects teenagers the most is social pressure, not a lack of information. See how that sentence sounds confident? It also creates a nice contrast at the end. Or in an essay, you could write, it is teamwork that often determines success rather than individual talent. Cleft sentences are great when you want controlled emphasis, but there's another way to create emphasis that sounds a little more impressive and punchy, especially in speaking and reviews, and that's fronting. Okay, now let's talk about fronting in a really clear, simple way. Fronting is when you take the thing that you want to emphasize and you put it right at the front of the sentence. Like you're saying, this is the main point, look here first. And the easiest way to understand this is with sentences like these. The film I loved. The coffee I adored. That book, I couldn't put it down. This city, I'll never forget. Now, in normal everyday English, you'd usually say, I love the film, I adored the coffee. But when you front it, you're adding drama and emphasis. It sounds a bit more expressive. It's the kind of thing you might say when you're telling a story or giving an opinion. So before fronting, you could say, I loved the film, or the film I loved. I really enjoyed the lesson. That lesson I really enjoyed. I would recommend this restaurant. This restaurant I definitely recommend. This is important at C1 because it shows range. You're not always using the same boring sentence order. You're controlling emphasis. In speaking part 4, you could say, social media, I wouldn't ban, but I do think we need better habits. In a film review, the soundtrack I absolutely loved, and it made the whole film more emotional. But here's a quick warning. Don't use it in every sentence, because one fronted sentence can sound confident and stylish, but 10 sound a bit theatrical. Now here's where it gets interesting. Sometimes fronting comes with inversion too. And inversion is when the word order changes after a negative phrase, like under no circumstances, rarely, or never. For example, under no circumstances should you skip exam practice. So what's happening here? Well, we've got fronting. Under no circumstances is moved to the front of the sentence. But we also have an inversion because we changed the word order to should you instead of you should. The normal word order would be you should not skip exam practice under any circumstances, but the fronted and inverted version sounds stronger and more formal. For example, under no circumstances should schools ignore students' mental health. Now, you could definitely use that in an essay. So, fronting shows you that you can play with the sentence order for emphasis. But now, let's move to a structure that shows a different kind of control. The ability to connect time, cause, and consequence in a really sophisticated way. And this is where mixed conditionals come in, and this is a very clear sign of advanced grammar range. Mixed conditionals are one of the clearest signs of advanced grammar range. They let you connect different times, a past situation with a present result or a present situation with a past result. Because real life is not simple, so this structure makes your English sound more precise. Now, let's revise our conditionals quickly. We've got the zero conditional, for example, if plus present simple, present simple. This is for facts, so if it rains, the floor gets wet. We've got the first conditional, if plus present simple, followed by will. And this is for, probable situations. If she calls, I'll answer the phone. The second conditional, if plus past simple, followed by would, for hypothetical or unlikely situations. If I won the lottery, I would invest my winnings. And finally, the third conditional, if plus past perfect, followed by would have. For example, this is for unreal past situations. For example, if I had worked harder, which I didn't, I would have got a better result. Now, mixed conditionals are where we combine the second and third conditionals. For example, if I had studied more, this is a third conditional beginning, I would feel more confident now. This is a second conditional ending. The past action didn't happen, and the present feeling is the result. Or example 2, present to past. If she weren't so busy now, she would have joined us yesterday. This present reality explains a past outcome. So mixed conditionals are only second and third conditionals mixed together. Either the first half is a third conditional and the second half is a second conditional, or the first half is the second conditional and the second half is the third conditional. These are amazing for speaking part 4 because part 4 is all about ideas, consequences, and reasoning. So if you can use one mixed conditional naturally, you instantly sound advanced. Here's a speaking part 4 example. If governments had invested earlier, we wouldn't be facing such serious problems now. Or in an essay, if more funding had been provided in the past, the system would be far more efficient today. So how can you practice this? Well, right now, with me, you can use this template. If I had plus past participle, I would now. So fill it with real life, keep it personal. And once you can do this with personal examples, you can do it with exam topics. And yes, you know what I'm going to say. Write your example sentence in the comments because practice makes perfect. Or as I prefer to say, practice makes progress because perfection doesn't exist. Mixed conditionals are brilliant because they show precision and flexibility, but the last structure is probably the most dramatic one and one of the most impressive in the whole video. So if you want a grammar structure that really sounds high level C1 when used correctly, this is it. Emphasis with inversion. Final one, and definitely one of the most impressive structures in this whole video, emphasis with inversion. If you can use this well, especially in writing or in a strong speaking part 4 answer, it instantly gives your English that high level C1 feel. It's dramatic, it's controlled, and it's very memorable, which is exactly why I saved it until the end. Inversion flips the normal word order after negative or limiting expressions to make that part of the exam sound even more important. So this is the formula. You have your negative or limiting phrase, your auxiliary verb, and then the subject, and then the main verb. For example, never have I seen such a beautiful library instead of I have never seen such a beautiful library. Or rarely do people talk about this instead of people rarely talk about this. Hardly had I arrived when the rain started. Now, the reason this sounds so advanced is because it's not the normal word order. It's more formal and dramatic, so it stands out. But here's my teacher warning. Use it like seasoning when cooking, because a little bit makes the sentence amazing, but too many inversions is going to ruin your essay or ruin your answers. In an essay on productivity, for example, you could write, rarely do people consider the long-term effects of poor sleep on productivity. or even in speaking part 4, rarely do we talk about how stress affects decision making. So make sure you don't just invent your own inversions and use any negative word. It doesn't quite work like that, but use the words that actually work with an inversion. So you might be thinking, but Izzy, how do you actually do an inversion? Very simple. If you can structure a question, you can structure an inversion. For example, I like chocolate. If you're asking a question, you might say, do I like chocolate? That is also an inversion. We're changing the order of the subject and the verb. And then the emphasis with inversion example would be never do I eat chocolate. Look at this other sentence. I have been there. Have I been there? Never have I been there. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Now, here are the most common ones you can use in your exam. So those are 10 advanced grammar structures that can make your English sound much more C1 in both speaking and writing. And here's the key. Do not try to use all 10 at once. Pick 3. Write 2 sentences with each one, and then use them in your speaking practice, in your writing, or even just in your notebook until they start to feel natural. And then come back to them again in a week, in 2 weeks, and in a month, because spaced repetition is what helps your grammar and vocabulary actually stick. Because grammar only helps you in the exam when you can use it automatically, not just when you recognize it on a worksheet. And if you want help building that kind of exam-ready English step by step, join the waitlist for my new C1 Advanced system. This is designed to help you pass your C1 Advanced exam in 6 months, and it's almost ready to go. So when you join the waitlist, you'll get a Use of English Part 2 cheat sheet immediately, plus early bird access and a really special price before my C1 program is released to the public. So you'll find the waitlist link up here in the corner, but I'll also drop it down in the description below. And tell me in the comments, which structure are you going to try first? Ellipsis, mixed conditionals, or inversions? Guys, see you in the next video.